Well, first of all, can you hear me? I want to thank Congressman Alcee Hastings for many things. He has been a great friend to Hillary and me when I was president. He supported our economic program, and remember, it was a good economy. We all rose together, and we're going to do that again. I want to thank Mayor Wilson for making me welcome here. Mayor Babb, Mayor Kiles, I want to thank them. I want to thank the World War II veteran who led the pledge, Ed Serafy, Sarah Helen Land, thank you. Senator Joseph Abruzzo, thank you for having me here. Commissioner McCarthy. I want to thank Pastor Reese and our organizer here, Darren Steptoe, because he told me he was an AmeriCorps volunteer, and this year, just a couple of months ago, we swore in our 1 millionth AmeriCorps volunteer. And Madam President, I want to thank you for having me here at Palm Beach. I took a picture with her backstage, and she sort of looked at me and smiled. She said, you know, I was the first woman president of this institution. I think she was trying to send me a message, and I got it. Let me get some business out of the way first. The federal court in Tallahassee gave us an extra day of early registration. So take advantage of it. If you know anybody that's not registered to vote, we got another day, and we got to get people registered to vote. There are people here who can help you with that. And then, early voting in Florida starts in 13 days. If you don't vote, it's a half a vote for the other guys. And Congressman Hastings is incisive. He didn't take long to tell you that if you do what you did in the primary and you vote for Hillary, she'll be the next president of the United States if Florida does so. So I want to briefly do something that's been a little hard to do in this election. Every time I go someplace, people ask me some political question and try to get us to stir up all this acid that's been floating around. And I say, you know, I just trust the American people to figure all this out. My job is one thing and one thing only, to tell you why Hillary should be the next president of the United States. For you. It's about you. This election belongs to you. The first thing I recommend is that you take it back. Because no matter who wins any election, there are consequences. There are consequences for those who vote and consequences for those who don't. The only difference is those who vote either get bragging rights or don't blame me rights. They're both better than, oh, if I had only known, aren't they? So here's what the deal is. You've already figured out you've never had a chance to vote in an election for president where the choice was more dramatic and more clear and where there was greater difference. So let me begin by saying this. This is a change election because President Obama is term limited out. The question is, do you want change that builds on all the good things that are happening and makes more good things happen, or do you want to go back to trickle-down economics and divided politics? Do you want to be for politics that divide, distract, and demonize, or do you want to be for politics that cooperate, concentrate, and create opportunities for all Americans? This is a pretty clear choice. Hillary's slogan, "Stronger Together," is not just two words. Let's just take a minute to remember your fellow Floridians and those just north of here who lost their lives or their property in that terrible hurricane. What happens after a disaster? People concentrate on what they have in common and they work together. I just read an amazing little book by a man named Sebastian Junger who writes about natural bad things that happen to people and how they band together. And he pointed out there were no rage shootings in America, no Orlandos, no San Bernardinos, no Sandy Hooks, and all the other things. None, zero for 2 years after 9/11. Why? Because we thought what we had in common was more important than our interesting differences. That's what this whole election's about. Stronger together or divide and conquer? Which is better, anger or answers? Answer. Which is better, resentment or empowerment? Empowerment. Which is better, conflict or cooperation? Cooperation. How should we relate to each other and people beyond our borders, with walls or bridges? Bridges. Exactly. That's what the whole thing is about. Look, first thing we need to understand is that the United States is for all of our problems. We got a lot of problems. There's a reason so many people are mad. About 80% of us still hadn't had a raise since the crash, right? If you adjust for inflation. About half the people in this country, if you adjust for inflation, are living on the same income they were living on the last day I was president. However, I predict to you that 10 years from now, people will look back on this period and give Barack Obama much higher marks for the economy than they do now. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. We just had our 79th straight month of increasing employment. 79. That's never happened before. Even when I was president, we all rose together, and the bottom 20%'s incomes in percentage terms rose more than the top 20%. And everybody did better than under trickle down. We never had 79 months in a row. Since 1981, we've been flirting with this trickle down economics. For 20 years, we've had Republican presidents, and for nearly 16 years, Democrats. So what's the job score? For our side, 31.9. For their side, 15.8. So slightly less than half as many jobs with 5 more years to build them. This is not rocket science. We are just this close to being able to all rise together again. But first, we got to have an investment strategy, not a trickle-down strategy. The most important thing we could do to create jobs in a hurry in America is to give our country a long, long delayed infrastructure program. And I'll give you an example. You know, when most people say that word, they think of roads, bridges, ports, airports, seaports. That's all true. But there's way more to it than that now. In Florida, you need to make sure that rising sea levels don't flood your cities out. So you need to make sure that the Everglades are not 10 feet underwater. When I was president and Al Gore was vice president, he and Hillary are down in South Florida today. We spent a lot of time and got a lot of support from agriculture and business as well as environmentalists to save the Everglades. It would be a national, global tragedy if they were all buried, and in the process, a lot of farming jobs were buried too. We lost a lot of. So infrastructure is building the resilience we need so that our coastal cities in Florida and all the way up the coast can be insured, so that people's houses can be saved, so that businesses can be saved, and so that national treasures like the Everglades can be saved. Infrastructure means looking at Flint, Michigan and what's happening there and saying the truth, which is it is nowhere near the only city in America where children have elevated lead levels in their blood because they got old, rusty water pipes. And if we tore them all up and put down clean ones, every last job would be an American job, and our children could be given a healthy future. Infrastructure acknowledges that somewhere between 3 and 5 million children every single day go to school and get a homework assignment that requires them to get on the internet, and they cannot do it because they do not have access to affordable broadband. So if we did that everywhere in America, number one, you could set up businesses in places that have been left out and left behind, and most important, every kid in this country would have the same chance to live up to his or her God-given ability. That's infrastructure. Infrastructure recognizes that America ranks first or second in the world in every survey of our ability to generate electricity from the sun and the wind and other clean sources, to stop the rise in sea levels and create a whole new American economy, including more manufacturing jobs, by driving down the cost of electricity. Because once you can generate and store power from the sun and the wind, it's free, right? It's free. But the problem is that once you get out of the places like Florida and west of the Mississippi, once you get away from Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, and California, by and large, the sun shines brightest and the wind blows hardest where the people are not. So you've got to have a whole modern electrical grid to take the power from where it's generated to where it can be used. That's infrastructure, and it's all American jobs. We need to remember that 2/3 of all the jobs created in America in the last 20 years have been created by small businesses. Hillary is the only person that's offered a $25 billion plan to accelerate lending to small businesses and to fully include women and minorities in small business lending. And to modify the bank rules to give people incentives to loan to their neighbors again. You know, I got tickled when there was nothing funny about that financial crash, but it was funny that some of the guys tried to blame me by saying, oh, that Bill Clinton, he enforced the Community Reinvestment Act. You know what the Community Reinvestment Act is? It's a law that says if you got an ATM machine in a community, you are obligated to consider people in that community for small business and family loans. And we got over 95% of the lending ever done up to that time under that law done in those 8 years, $800 billion in community investment, and we were in the top 5 countries in the world in small business lending. We're not in the top 10 now because after that crash, banks got scared. I strongly support the law President Obama signed called the Dodd-Frank Law that will prevent Wall Street from wrecking Main Street. But Main Street needs access to bank lending, and Hillary will bring it back if we elect her. So, if you have a good economic program, people have to be able to participate. The most important thing is education. She wants universal preschool for everybody. She wants our schools to take the limited amount of money you can get from the federal government and focus on what works. There have been too many tests. I'm not against all tests, and she isn't. But the research shows that the most important thing is whether the teacher gets better and the principal does a good job and the families are involved. Those are the 3 things that matter most. One good teacher can raise a person's income 10% a year for life. Just one. And Hillary believes it shouldn't depend on your zip code whether you can get a good education. The second thing is we have to open the doors of post-high school education to everybody, beginning with what's done here at this community college. Hillary wants to redignify skills training and finance it and reward corporations that will finance this sort of training and apprenticeship programs so people can get good middle-class jobs without a four-year college degree. She wants free tuition for all community colleges. She has a program for free tuition for all four-year state colleges for families with incomes of up to $125,000 a year. That's 85% of them. She wants debt-free college for everybody else through things like a dramatic expansion in work-study programs. And then she got the most interesting plan for people that have already got a lot of debt. That would be 20 million of us. 20 million students and their families have already accumulated debt, average debt $30,000. But there are doctors, lawyers, and accountants that owe between $100,000 and $200,000. So here's how her plan would work. First, she wants to put an end to the scandalous situation that a college loan is the only one you cannot refinance. That's crazy, isn't it? I bought a pair of jeans a couple months ago from a lady I've been doing business with for 10 years. She just had a son graduate from one of our state colleges in New York. I said, how's your boy doing? She said, great. He's made good grades. He's going to get a good job. I said, has he got any debt? She said, yeah, quite a bit. What's the interest rate? She said, 9%. I said, have you still got a mortgage? She said, of course I do. Look what I do for a living. I said, okay, did you refinance it when the interest rates went down? She said, absolutely. What's your interest rate? Under 4. Now, there's something wrong with a country that charges young people more than twice the interest rate for their college education that their parents pay on a home mortgage. So here's what her plan is. First, let everybody refinance. If you did that overnight, 20 million people would save an average of more than $2,000, and those that owe more would save a lot more. Second, let everybody have the option to pay the loan back as a small fixed percentage of their after-tax income over 10 to 20 years. If you take a public service job, the rest is forgiven after 10 years. If you take any job and you borrowed $200,000, the rest is forgiven after 20 years, and you can never be charged more than 10% of your after-tax income. And if you go to the bank because you want to borrow $80,000 to start a small business, a new bakery or whatever, the bank will know under her plan that for 3 full years, your obligations to make payments on that loan will be suspended while you get the business up and going. This can change the future of America. Look, there's a lot of other things we could talk about. We need police reform and we need the police. Both. Nobody should be afraid to walk outside at night. And Hillary just had a fascinating meeting with some of the best police chiefs in America. And they said, look, we're for body cameras, and we're for better training programs, and we're for strong community liaisons. But what we really need in this country is more comprehensive mental health treatment in every community in this country. And so she came out with a program to do that. She was the first candidate to propose a program to provide a comprehensive national network of support to deal with this prescription drug and heroin epidemic. And You might be interested to know here that this is the first drug epidemic in my lifetime where the addiction rates are higher in small town and rural America than they are in urban areas. So she was the first and is now the only candidate to propose a plan that will help people without regard to race based on income and isolation, including people who are her opponents' most ardent supporters, people in coal country and people in inner cities and people in small towns and Native Americans on reservations where the unemployment rate is too high, the poverty rate is too high. She has proposed a program, first, something else he's supported for years, to give a certain fixed percentage of federal development funds to these really poor areas. And second, and more important, to give a whopping tax credit to anybody that will invest money in areas left out and left behind to create jobs there. So, that's what I'm saying. Answers are better than anger. She's got some answers here. The last thing I want to say about all this is that there are two things that could keep this from becoming the era of greatest shared prosperity and opportunity this country's ever seen. And they're not, everything we need to do is fairly straightforward, achievable, and affordable. And I haven't even talked about what science and technology is going to do for us. Every person in this audience who's 25 or younger has a legitimate chance to live to be 100 years old without the threat of Alzheimer's or other dementia, just because of the advances in human genome. We are about to make the first real advances in life expectancy for people with cancer in 50 years. It's going to be an exciting time if we do the right things. There are two things that could threaten it: continued partisan political gridlock in Washington and all the trouble around the world, the slow economic growth and the upheavals occasioned by terrorism, the most massive movement of immigrants into Europe since World War II, all the upheaval. So why should you be for her? One is she's the best change maker I've ever known. I've known her a long time. Today is my 41st wedding anniversary. So, but look, before she was 30 years old, including before she got out of law school, she had been to South Carolina to try to get African-American teenage boys out of adult prisons, to South Texas to register Mexican Americans who'd been systematically shut out of the political system. Then, as soon as she got out of law school, she went to Alabama to try to help prove that these so-called private academies were just segregated schools by another name and not entitled to federal taxes. Then she went to Massachusetts to find out why there were so many children on the census rolls than there were enrolled in schools, and it was because kids with disabilities were, at that time, unlawfully being kept from being in the public schools. And she worked to empower people with disabilities and focus on their abilities, something she has done ever since. Secondly, everything she ever achieved in public life, as when I was governor of Arkansas, when she was first lady, when she was a senator from New York, when she was Secretary of State, everything, she always managed to get some Republicans to go along with enough Democrats to pass what she wanted to do, and she will as president. And the final thing I will say is, thank you. The final thing I want to say is, you got to have somebody with the standing in the world and the understanding of the world to keep us safe enough and give us the space we need to grow and lead the world away from all this anger and road rage, which is a global phenomenon. And that's why, look at what the Republicans have said who spend their lives in national security. Dozens and dozens of them said they couldn't be for her opponent. A significant number of them endorsed her. The first President Bush's national security advisor, a retired admiral, endorsed her. And lots of others did. And look at all these Republican newspapers in Crucial, Ohio. There are two newspapers, the Columbus newspaper in the capital and the Cincinnati Enquirer on the border of Kentucky, that had not endorsed a Democrat in 100 years. They endorsed Hillary for president. In Arizona, the largest Republican paper, the largest newspaper in Phoenix, the Arizona Republican, was started in 1890. They have never endorsed a Democrat. They endorsed Hillary. In Texas, one of the most famous Republican newspapers in the United States, the Dallas Morning News, last endorsed a Democrat in 1941 on the verge of the World War II, when they said, you know, it might not be the best time to change presidents. They never have done it since. They endorsed Hillary. So I want you to think about that. We are stronger together. Cooperation is better than conflict. Conflict may win a bunch of elections, but once you get there and you got the job and you got to stand and deliver, and people's lives are going to be changed and our children and grandchildren's future are riding on it, all that matters is whether you do something. You know, I used to just love giving speeches. I prefer doing things now. The older you get, I just got back from Israel. I spoke at the funeral of my friend Shimon Peres, who died at 93, former president, prime minister, foreign minister of Israel, a genius, a fabulous guy. He did an interview with Charlie Rose not long before he died, and Charlie said, "What do you want your legacy to be?" You know what he said at 93? "I prefer to think about tomorrow more than yesterday." Let somebody else write the legacy. What are we going to do for the kids? What are we going to do in the future? We are stronger together. We're going to rise together. If Florida votes for Hillary for president, you can do it. Thank you.